It will take nothing short of 100 proof living to restore lives. Join a conversation between a cop and a criminal with Brian Yates and Chris Pridmore, working to inspire and motivate others, rebuilding the communication breakdown. This is the 100 Proof Living Podcast.
Welcome back to Conversations with a Cop and a Criminal. I'm Brian Yates.
And I'm Chris Pridmore. And Brian, we've got a good show here today. We've got a great guest, Giovanni Marino, like Dan Marino. I just realized the spelling. Sorry about that. I call him Gio. I'm pretty excited to get in his story and share what he's got to offer. I did want to kick off the show today with a story this week. On our website, 100proofliving.com, we talk about news and things that we're involved in the community with. And I had the privilege through some volunteer work I do with Shatterproof out of New York City. They sent me down to the American College of Emergency Physicians this week as a representative on a panel called Removing Stigma in the Emergency Department. And I was part of a 5-person panel in front of some of the leading physicians in the country. And it was pretty powerful. It was a great opportunity to sit there and tell our stories and recognize that there's more to stigma than just, ill-advised words. It's behavior that we have in the buckets we put on people and how we treat different patients. So I was pretty excited about doing that. But it did open up something for me that really took me in the belly of the beast to my addiction. I had a new understanding about what addiction was for me in a way that I had not understood before. And one of those things was my origin of my addiction was not what I thought it was until this week. I hadn't traveled since I've been in my sober state. So traveling was new to me, and traveling apparently, as I look back on it, was really the birthplace of my alcohol addiction. In my past life, I traveled a lot. And so airports, airplanes, dinners, sales meetings, all these places, I was saturated with alcohol, but it was in a normal environment, so it was perfectly acceptable. What I found, it was actually a birthplace of a felon. It was a birthplace of a man that shattered his home, that ruined his friendships and destroyed his reputation and his freedom. And it was powerful to walk into that place. But as I shared with Brian through the week, is that I found this spiritual thing that we talk about, our spiritual nature. It was so powerful to me to understand that the reason I was delivered was there were tactics, but I was allowed to see this moment this week because now was the time for me to understand. Now was the time God saw fit for me to understand at that moment so that I could absolutely have the rigor I needed to walk into my first speaking engagement on a national level. And there's more to that, and I will write about it and put it on the website. But it was such a powerful week for me to understand I'm not what I once was. But also I know how I got there so that I can put up appropriate hedges around me to say, I don't want to go back there. You know what I mean? As these new opportunities come up, I don't want to go back. And that was important for me. So I wanted to share that. From a bit of a housekeeping thing, I'm plugging a sweatshirt today and the stigma. That's what recovery looks like. These are buddies of ours out of Philadelphia, and Caitlin keeps trying to steal my hoodie. And the stigma, they've got this great product they have. It's just a side business, husband and wife do, and they put these out. And what was nice when I got this, they sent a little note saying, if you want to tell us about handwritten note, if you want to tell us about your recovery story, send us back. So it was pretty neat. But yeah, it was a good week, and these are a few things I wanted to get out here. Brian, you've had a lot of changes going on and a lot of things you've been going on in your life.
Yeah. Well, first, throughout the week, as you were sharing some of that revelation to me, I'm kind of excited because I've watched as you gain, an equipping, every time you gain this new revelation or deeper understanding, you always turn it around and immediately try to share it. And so I'm excited to kind of see how that plays out, and working as a peer and just being so passionate out in the community, wherever you go. I think over the next few months, we're all going to hear stories about how this kind of new understanding will probably play into helping other people gain that understanding. And so that's awesome. And in terms of that, for me, I've actually had a few law enforcement folks reach out to me after listening to some of these episodes, and we talk about learning to appreciate people and how that impacted me and kind of some of my transition, or what I would say, growth throughout my law enforcement career, about kind of how I viewed people and maybe some of how the frustrations of work really impacted me. And then growing through some of that and being mentored by great people. And applying this learning to appreciate people in law enforcement specifically, they kind of want to know more about that. And so I'm going to do some writing. We'll be posting it on the website just to try to help, that group of people understand that there are different ways of doing things, and that there's a way to do that difficult job, sometimes with some very difficult circumstances, in a more effective way, so that when you go home at night, there's more fulfillment there, because you're actually being more effective than just hook 'em and book 'em. And I think, especially in smaller communities where you're interacting with the same people all the time, I think there are ways that you can go about to change your perspective and change kind of your communication and the employment of your authority in an effective way, where even the people around you and even some of those chronic violators will start to interact with you differently. So anyway, so a few people reached out to me and wanted to kind of know more. And so I'm going to try to put some stuff together and post that on the website. But
that's awesome.
It's exciting. It's exciting to have people want to know more. If we're saying a few things and people are finding some gaps in what we're saying, that gives us an opportunity to fill that in and be more effective in our message, and hopefully be more effective in helping others.
Yeah, what I love about that, Brian, is, you and I, when we first started working on this, that was really a vision that we had anyway, was to incorporate the law enforcement community. This show was never supposed to be about addiction, just only about addiction. It really was about life options. And, it's encouraging to hear law enforcement start to engage that way. So that's good. Before we get into the interview, though, we got an important part of this. Really, where we've headed with 100 Proof Living is our community involvement, and with Caitlin's community and the things that she's been doing. I'd like to spend some time with conversation about the things that have been going on. I know you've had a heck of a couple of weeks since we've been in here. So, how are you doing today?
Yeah, well, so the last few weeks, needless to say, have been pretty rough. Battling with kind of like feeling physically sick, but also losing someone very special to me. Being out in the community, it certainly, and I know you all can relate, has kind of its pros and cons, because I get to see the remaking or the rebirth of people, and I get to see them reintegrating, but I also see the devastation of it, and going into this job, I knew that's what I was walking into. I had my own version of devastation, and so I knew that that's what I was also going to see. So my involvement with Alcoholics Anonymous, which is primarily my foundation along with God for my survival and my living, means that I also need to give this thing away. So in a little bit of a different way of being a peer is actually being a sponsor. And that's literally taking someone through that big book. And so a sponsee of mine passed away shortly after our last recording. And it's just sorrow. I'm heartbroken over it. It's so she was young. It's hard to see a life lost to mental health and this awful disease. And but I learned a lot from her. Through every painful experience in my life, and not to make this about me, it certainly reshapes me. So for that, I'm very grateful.
Right. One thing that we talked about this actually this morning a little bit is I feel like through that, I know that was a tragic situation. It was really for the recovery community locally. But one of the powerful examples that you illustrated for people is that we have this thing when somebody overdoses or somebody has any type of other things that happen with mental health that causes loss of life. We see a lot of overdose. We see a lot of relapse because we don't know as a community how to deal with things just moving forward on our plan. And one of the things I respect and appreciate about you is that I know you were sad. I know it wholeheartedly. I know you were struggling, and I saw you pull out to your support and move forward. But what we all have to do is recognize when these tragedies happen, it's not worth throwing all that we've worked for away. And I would just cry out to the recovery community to say, look, when you lose somebody that you loved and it makes you feel that sort of way, the last thing we want to do is be mourning your loss too. And the stability you showed through that was an absolute beacon in the community that we've seen over and over again, relapse, overdose after death.
Right. Yeah. I don't know.
Rough one.
Yeah.
You had some other stuff going on too, though. That was a little more positive with the schools.
So shortly after I had heard about her passing, I was scheduled to speak at Geneva High School to a group of 10th graders at a health class. It was going to be 5 different classes that would come in, so I'd be there, throughout the day, kind of saying the same spiel over and over. It was definitely hard for me to show up, but at the same time, I knew that was my obligation and that's really what God intends for me. And it was really a powerful way to get out of my head for the day. And I would say that they were very, very attentive. They were eager to hear, the message that I and another colleague had to share. And I think that's where the crux of this is that getting that communication and that awareness out there at such a young age. I was mindful of the language that I would use and the detail, but at the same time, these kids, and I said it to them, I said, hey, you guys are smart and you've seen some stuff in life and I am not going to undermine that, but let's have a conversation about it and let's talk about it a little bit, and not like a scared straight type of deal, but this is where my poor decisions led me. And I just pray you never have to go down that road.
Right.
Well, Caitlin, I think that's super powerful because, every year at homecoming in almost every high school around the country, they do some kind of reenactment of a drunk driving accident, or they do things with kind of this pseudo imagery. And when we talk about a vivid reality, I think it's so much more powerful for someone like you to actually impart to them the pain that's involved. Because if I see my buddy Jimmy out there laying through the car window all, with fake blood on him, it's going to be silly to me. Partially because I'm an idiot, but for the most part, it doesn't have that impact. It is a reality. People understand people, die in drunk driving accidents. People die with overdosing. But when someone real comes in and shares their pain and is authentic about it, and we talk about that authenticity all the time and being able to make an impact in this community, I value the fact that you'll go up there and continue to share this message in spite of your own loss and in spite of the things that you continue to struggle with, like we all do. But I think those are the things that we can do that actually have an opportunity to create that impact of a vivid reality. So thanks for going and doing that. And certainly thanks for sharing this, because I think you're going to continue to have people come up to you over the years that are going to say, what you said really stuck with me. And it's the thing that got me through that season.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those kind words. When there's a death within our community, because like Chris had said, this really was like a ripple effect. It affected an entire community of people. And for me, it can sort of make this so heavy, and almost I ask myself, what am I even doing? What's the point of me going out there and putting myself in a vulnerable position when, to me, this disease just keeps winning over and over and over. And it really puts a heavy darkness on my life. And I don't know quite how else to explain it. So I almost needed to do something outside of myself, especially with the younger population, to just even re-spark or rekindle that hope within myself, that this isn't the end. And unfortunately, more make it than don't. And that's a hard reality that I'm not so sure I like accepting.
Right.
But
you're passionate about what you're doing, and I'm not. It's hard for me not to get a soapbox about this, because I see the value in what you're doing, but I also understand how we get so defeated by the numbers. If we look at the total losses, it's a rough battle. But I can tell you, there's 3 of us sitting in the room right now that are winning. I mean, people do win. Right now, in active users, it represents 2.3 million people win, that then go into the 50 million people that are currently they're out in AAs and all these other things that are actually had a history of substance abuse. There are people that do win, and what we get to be is a face of that. So that's something that's encouraging to me, is that we have the opportunity to show people that we will meet that one, we will help that one through. And that, to me, I feel like that's really our battle cry. I tell you, though, as a model, one of the things I'm really appreciative of here is I feel like I've been so blessed to get to do 100 Proof Living with you two. And the reason I see that is this week was a perfect model of that. This travel was not, and we can model this for these kids you're talking to as well. Their isolation is not helping them. The suicide rates are going crazy because they're isolating. We need the community. We need each other. And I know, Caitlin, you've reached out to me when you've been down on some things, and I've been trying to encourage you too. You've encouraged me. Brian, when I have an exciting moment, I share it with you. When I have a down moment, you're there to encourage me. We don't have 100 people, but we've got each other. And that really does help in those days to keep fortifying this message and keep moving it forward. And I find that tremendously valuable.
Yeah. So
sorry, Caitlin, I just think real quick, I think that goes into, sometimes it's modeling just how to have relationships, and it is modeling how to be there for one another. And not dismissing someone because they're having a weak moment, not dismissing someone because, they made a bad choice. It is that embracing. And, among our little funky bunch here and then out into the people we have external relationships with, I think you're seeing that to be true, that, it is this band that's coming together, and I think that's truly the way to make it's not a big program. It's not a fancy presentation. It's being real. And it's that authenticity.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, I know for myself, people just want to be seen. They just want to be heard, and they might not have had that for, the course of their life. Or I know that this disease for me keeps me very isolated in my mentality. So to just know that there's others like me and to say, I get it, to segue into that in terms of the community aspect of it, over at the Recovery Center, it's flourishing. I'm very excited to see how many people are engaging. It seems like the self-help meetings in particular are taking that action step, like the Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Refuge Recovery.
Are they getting participation in those groups?
They are. They're
good.
actually getting very high numbers for all of them. So I think that's encouraging. And I just say that not to promote in any type of way, but just to say that there are options and opportunities out there, like-minded individuals, and we're trying to provide those multiple pathways, whatever works for you. Not to say that there's just one pathway. I can say what works for me, of course. We're also the team there is doing such an incredible job. There's voc ed counselors too who are really doing some phenomenal work in terms of offering more services, career one-on-one type pathways. So I think the opportunity for futuristic type growth and having purpose can certainly be found just within the walls of this, this recovery center. And that's just to say that, it's the way we interact with each other. And when I was going the last few weeks, when I was going through the motions of, what am I even doing? Am I making an impact? God revealed himself to me. And I was looking through a note. I just want to share this. I was looking through my daughter's notebook, and she's really into writing. She's 8 years old. And so she was showing me something, and she wrote, God, keep me sober today, and your will be done, or something like that. And that just showed me, if I don't think I'm making an impact, or what I'm doing doesn't matter, gosh, I'm remarkably wrong, because this little girl is listening to me. She's hearing me. She's picking up on, the little rituals I say and do every morning for my sobriety. And that's really what I needed to hear. And kind of got back on my game, awesome. After reading that. That was very important for me. So the masses may frustrate you, but in your home, you're winning. And that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and I hope that you'll take encouragement too over the years, as it's not just the small circle of impact that you're going to have, but you just spoke in front of a huge group yesterday. It might have impacted one of those people, and that impact might not even really come into play for a couple of years, and they hit another low moment. And the things that they've heard along the way from people like you that are doing it in a real way, that's the kind of stuff that matters. It's not just reading a pamphlet. It's not some of this external kind of intangible stuff. It's pressing the flesh with real people. And I appreciate these updates, but it also gets me excited because these are the things that make an impact.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the point of that whole thing, I think, is like Brian was saying, is that we do reach out, we do impact one in those larger groups. But selfishly, I'll be honest with you, just talking about this stuff and being free to admit what's gone on in my life, I get more blessing from people just getting in these conversations. I can't tell how many Uber drivers I've been in conversations with over the last year that have just wowed me. I was just in one with a guy in Dallas.
What's your Uber rating?
My Uber rating? I have no idea. Awesome. I don't know.
Awesome. I'm a 4.8. I got knocked down.
I'm a 9er. I have no idea. No, I'm a 5. Actually, you're talking about the stars?
Way.
Absolutely. I'm a polite Uber driver. I just sit there and talk about 100 proof living.
I've never seen anybody with a 5 that's had more than like 10 rides.
I'm a 5, and I've had like a million rides. I could actually buy a house with as many Uber rides as I've had. But the point is these small conversations. This guy in Dallas, never met him before in my life. He picks me up at this meeting. I get in the car, and every now and then I just do this just for my own humor. And he goes, "Oh, what are you doing here on business?" I go, "Yeah." I go, I'm a drunk, and they asked me to go speak in front of a bunch of physicians, just kind of joking with him. And he goes, oh, I take it back. But I go, no, I'm actually in recovery. But yeah, it was a pretty cool meeting. And we got this whole conversation started and come to find out, very strong faith. He's a Christian. His belief is that he's here to serve, and that his life is all about that. He does other things, but this is his life. Man, I get so fired up about people with that kind of commitment. There's no apologies. I don't care what you say about me. I'm going forward and I'm going at this because I believe I'm called to do this. What an awesome experience. Just because I decided to be 14 in the car and be a smart aleck about my history, I got put in my place. I'm still a 5 though. But
good on you.
Yeah, out of 10. But so I appreciate the update. We're going to continue to have this type of a format at the beginning, unlike what we've had before, because we do have a little bit more leniency on time. But I was really excited about our guests that we have today. Personally, because I have a lot of vested interest in Giovanni. I'm going to call you Gio from here on out, guys, just because that's what I know him as. But, well, Gio, we were really happy to have you here. It's a tremendous story. It's tragic for me in a lot of ways. It could have been very tragic for me the very first time I met you in some peer work. And for those that are the compliance police, G and I had a very candid conversation about, what he's comfortable with sharing. And we did meet in a medical setting. So without much more, I'd like to hear your story and share that with the audience. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. So my story is quite a long one, actually. It kind of spans the time frame of a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And it started when I was a freshman in college, and I was just coming out of this tiny private school. It's actually up in Rochester, so I am from around here. And I got out into the real big world with, my dad kind of said it was, a small fish going into a big sea, because came from a graduating class of 45, going into a class of, 1,000 at minimum. And it was a little overwhelming, and I just wanted to fit in and make friends. So, I probably got into not the best group of people, and it didn't really start, like, my vaping journey did not really start in the sense of, oh, I'm going to do this because I think that it's going to give me a head rush or a high. I just did it because I thought, hey, it looks kind of cool.
Now, you're not generally speaking about vaping in general. Are you speaking vaping in general, or where it ultimately led to?
This is where I started personally. Okay. I just thought that it looked cool. I didn't really think of the consequences that would happen if I kept using and using. And so that's how it all began. And for about, we'll say 2 semesters, I was doing that. And I did that over this past summer as well, and starting my sophomore year at the same college. And what really led to the downfall was I ended up getting a new apartment at that college, completely new setting in this new place that I've never been in before. And, I made a lot of poor choices. I spent a lot of money that I shouldn't have on, vaping devices and whatnot. And I ended up smoking all day, every day, doing nothing else but smoking, watching Netflix.
And that was THC?
Yes,
THC. That's what I was getting at. It wasn't just generally...
It was both.
Okay.
So it was nicotine and THC.
Okay.
And I, would easily drop $170 dollars on THC, sit there for a week, smoke, however many carts that I got, and then just, be a bum, essentially. I would do my work online. I wouldn't go to class. I would just do my work and submit it. And, I think it really did a damper on my mental health. It really messed me up mentally. And I was kind of in the place where I felt like I couldn't get out. And then I started, noticing symptoms of smoking, of, some effects of the smoking, where I would wake up every morning and just vomit in the toilet and then go back to bed. And because I was in pain and my whole stomach hurt because I was just eating junk, I would smoke again, and then the cycle would repeat. And I would use smoking as a way to escape the pain, whether it be mental or physical, and it just led to more pain, mentally and physically. So, so after about 2 weeks of that, I had planned that I was going to go up to the Adirondacks with my mom and, just go for a little vacation, three-day weekend or something like that. And I end up getting there, and I'm just not feeling good. I'm sick. I have fever. I'm throwing up, and she got really worried about me. She was like, "Oh, it might be a stomach bug." Neither of my parents knew that I smoked nearly as much as I was.
And your family has medical history.
And they have medical history. And what ended up happening was...
In terms of professional history.
Right, yeah, it says, yeah. And what ended up happening was I was also up there with my best friend. And, the whole weekend I was throwing up. I couldn't do anything. And on the way back home, my friend was driving me back home. And I get a text from my mom, and it's this link to a website that was talking about cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, which is, throwing up uncontrollably from marijuana use. And she said, "Have you been smoking?" And I looked at my friend, and I said, "Should I be honest with her? Should I tell her?" And he looked back at me and he was like, "Yeah, I think that you should." And so I told her, and she's like, "Okay, we have to go to the ER." And so I get home, and like, as you had mentioned, my family has medical background, as in terms of profession. Yeah. And so my stepmom gave me IV fluids, and then the next morning I went off to the ER. I was still throwing up pretty much hourly. And it took me 4 hours to get seen because they didn't really think that there was much wrong with me. But they found that I was severely dehydrated. I had, blood in my urine and stuff like that. It was awful, terrible. And I don't actually remember leaving that hospital, like the hospital, after my first checkup.
Right.
And that's when I just blacked out. And then I was in the hospital for a week and a half. And then I ended up waking up to my best friends looking at me and crying. And, not knowing what happened, being in pain, that strict, like, the pain that I felt was just catastrophic. It really affected me. And it's not just physical pain that I'm talking about. It was also the mental pain of seeing my family all around me. I have 4 parents, and all of them around me just crying, or seeing my best friends like in tears because they have to see me bedridden like that. Well,
their stress, this was when I met you, shortly before I met you. Yeah. Their stress was also the fact that while you were out, you had coded 3 times.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So their stress was that they had seen you gone 3 times within that period of time. And so to me, I sit here as you're talking, and I'm having a certain level of emotion because of the relationship that we've grown, to realize that you almost were not here from this. So, your story is tragic. And, one of the things we really want to get to is understanding, for others, all these things you were feeling before that kind of led to that way, what we can do to get some prevention. But that was that I remember walking in the ICU, seeing there, and your family was definitely a high level concern. You seemed very panicked, and it could have been a very tragic situation.
And my family is one of those families that they're very upbeat people. They're not typically down in the dumps or anything like that. They like to keep very optimistic, but just seeing them like that, what else can change your entire life after that? That just the looks that you get, and that it's not, they didn't really say anything. It was more the looks that got to me, because a picture says 1,000 words. It's just ingrained into my memory. So
I remember our first conversations. You were really kind of had a lot of words of disappointment, regret, concern, there was fear, because at that point we weren't really sure what the long-term prognosis was with the lung damage that you had. It was a pretty scary situation. I know your family was definitely had all the things that we would expect from family, concern, fear. What were you thinking? There was all that going on too. So that was then, and now you've been on this journey.
Yeah.
Tell us about how that's been going.
So as far as my journey is concerned, I think that, it's very powerful, through and through. The more I do talks, the more I interact with people that I meet, it's so powerful to me. I'm really glad that, I changed my life around, which I did. I moved into a new place with my friends. I've been working out every day. I've been still doing speeches and helping the community around me learn more about vaping and what it can do and the effects. And I think that, having the opportunities to do that is what's really helping me through. It's keeping me busy, keeping me on the grindstone. And I think that one of the biggest issues that I had was boredom, that the spare time, the time in between, that's what really gets me. That's
You're
when
saying
I'll have
now or then?
It used to get me, right? So if I had downtime, like a lot of downtime, I would just sit there and be in my own head, and that would lead to, now I want to smoke. I mean, I still get those cravings when I have downtime, but I've been so busy and, keeping myself busy, purposefully trying to keep myself busy, that it makes it so much easier to not have those cravings or those thoughts. And I think that is, it makes it much easier to deal with, I think.
Right. Some of the things, and I know that Caitlin and Brian can probably weigh in on some of this too, is that, some things you've expressed to me that led you there were a lot, not just boredom, because a lot of people get bored, but you had some anxieties and some pressures and probably some expectations that were a little bit too heavy, but at the same time, many that you perceived.
Right. Yeah.
So, you were concerned about the expectations that were being put on you that may not have actually been there.
Right. Yeah. So, I always kind of had this ideology that, I had to get a good job and get, what my parents, right.
Not letting you off the hook on that one.
What my parents deemed to be a good job, right? Yeah. Like be a doctor or a lawyer or someone that makes a lot of money. And because that's just how my family was, right? I mean, I didn't feel that pressure as much from my dad, but from my mom for sure, because she's a doctor, and my older brother's super smart, so he's going to be making a lot of money. But, I am more of the type of person that wants to interact with other people. And typically those jobs don't make as much as, say, doctor or lawyer. Yes. So, so that was really where the pressure came from, because I thought that I had to get, a STEM field job and, go to school for STEM. And, that's just not what I was about. That's just not what I wanted my life to be. But I definitely felt that pressure for sure.
Well, and in terms of expectations, Gio, so there's some of those externals, right, that our parents put on us, we put on our own kids. But then I would say also your expectation, right? Nobody grows up as a 5-year-old thinking, man, I want to code 3 times in the hospital, right? And scare the crap out of my family. So as you had expectations growing up, and maybe they were different from your folks, but as you have come through now this dynamic kind of a ground zero moment, and now you're rebuilding, right? You're setting new expectations. Can you talk a little bit to maybe, regardless of what you think your parents may have wanted for you, you wanted something for yourself, but maybe now how has that changed? I mean, you talk about being intentional and you're doing things to not go back down, a very unhealthy and harmful path. But what about your life in general? I mean, growing up, kids talk about they want to be a firefighter, they want to be an astronaut, they want to do this, they want to do that. Sometimes these ground zero moments shatter that. And some people struggle to try to rebuild it. Like, I'm still going to do the same thing no matter what. And if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I see where sometimes healthy people that are in recovery, or healthy people that are coming out of the loss of a family member or a conviction or something else, seem to be okay with rebuilding something new. And that's where some joy and some encouragement can come in. In law enforcement, when I deal with people that are at their worst, there is an very consistent theme of, what does it matter? Because now that I've done this, it's never going to get any better. Or now that I've done this again, it shows I'm never going to, do anything other than this. And until they get to that place where, with the love and support of people around them, and sometimes that influence from God saying that, no, there is something better for you, their mindset changes. And now rebuilding something new becomes a focal point that's actually super fulfilling and is enjoyable, versus that trying to clamber up the old rope again and falling back down to the ground. So can you talk a little bit about, and I know this season, this path isn't super long for you, but now that you're going down this path, what is the new outlook for you?
Yeah. So, I think that I really enjoy working with people. I really like being face to face with someone. I like helping people. And one of my favorite jobs I ever had was being a camp counselor for a summer camp. And, I got to work with a range of kids, whether they be from rich or poor, or they have disabilities or anything like that. It was the most fulfilling job that I had, for sure. And so I figured, well, how can I, go to college for that? Right. Essentially, that's what my thought process was. And I realized, I'm good at STEM stuff. I'm not, I would get good grades, but I didn't like the work that came with it. It seemed very technical to me. And so I said, oh, well, what about psychology? It kind of combines the two of that, I get to interact with people, learn about people, eventually help people if I become a therapist or something like that. And it also stimulates, my brain, and I can kind of keep busy with the work. So I think that is one of the goals. I think goal setting is huge.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest drivers that I've had, for sure. And even if it's little goals, I think that the little goals that get you through the day is really what matters. Take it 20 minutes at a time, take it an hour at a time. That's what really matters.
So I'm curious what you've been doing lately to manage the balance between goals and obsessing over the details. Making sure you don't get anxious over a lot of things you can't control. Have you found some tactics that have worked for you? Because there are a lot of things that in these early stages that are definitely not in your control.
Right. See, that's tough, because whenever I think about stuff that, that's not in my control, it typically takes me to a place where I don't like to be. You know what I mean? I just want to get out of that and do something. So I think distraction is a good way to deal with that. If I can't control the situation, if it's out of my reach, then, I'm just going to do something else.
But you're not obsessing over it. And
No. Yeah. I haven't really noticed, the obsession factor of it, Yeah. I think there are times that, I'll say, oh, I really got to get this thing done. And, if it's not done a certain way, I get really, I'm a little confused on what you're trying to say.
No, I'm just saying, because I noticed that there was two pieces that you've talked a lot about was anxiety. I think that you're addressing it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's anxiety, and there was all these things that, because I remember early on when you first were coming back into this, okay, what do I do now with this information? You know, do I go back to the same school? Do I switch schools? What do I do for a job? You know, I love this camp work, but I don't know what to do for a living. There's a lot of those things. When you're making those decisions, there are some things that are still within your control.
Right.
But there's also a lot of things that are outside of your control. And those things can a lot of times cause us to be anxious. I know they do for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just curious, knowing that anxiety and those types of things drove you a lot to your use. I was just curious, you know, what tactics you were doing to make sure you remain healthy with those types of things. Because really, I know Caitlin and I have talked about this too, is those things outside of our control oftentimes are the things that are really, really rough. It's first discernment, as they tell us in the rooms, but at the same time, it's doing either nothing or at least addressing it correctly. And I was just curious your thoughts.
I think being in a community is really what helps with that. I think that, you know, I've got my closest friends live up here, and you know, my two best friends are who I'm rooming with. So there's not anything I can come home and I can talk to them, and talking with someone and hearing someone else's opinion, you know, kind of get that reassurance that, you know, you have someone on your side, that you have someone playing on the same team as you, is really, really, you know, powerful against anxiety. Because seclusion, I know you guys were talking about that earlier, you know, when you're secluded, that's when, you know, your brain goes to places that you know, the dark places, the places that you don't want to be.
Right.
And, you know, I've had you as a mentor, and whenever I feel my worst, I do text you, and I say, you know, hey, what am I supposed to do? Right? Because I feel like I'm out of my mind right now. Like, how am I supposed to cope with this? This is completely new. And, you know, it's hard to do that to an extent, because I want to be independent and I want to be my own person. But I think that, you know, it ultimately leads me to the right place. And I'm glad that I have the capability to say, you know, I'm not in a good place. Help me out, right? Mm-hmm. If I can have that honesty and that kind of full disclosure with my friends and my family, and, you know, you, of course, and other mentors and stuff, then I know that I'll make it through, right? And you guys can give me some advice that I may have never even thought of, and then I can use that and put it to work, right?
Right.
So I think that that's the biggest defense against anxiety for me.
So I just want to cut in here. Gio, I want to say I really appreciate your story and just your vulnerability and honesty with it. Although, you know, the substances or the behavior might be a little different in terms of my journey, I can tell you that the symptomology of it all, like you talk about coping, you talk about, you know, this loss of control feeling, all of that I can completely relate to. So you are certainly not alone in this. And I do think that at that younger age, there are a lot of pressures that tell us we're like scrambling to figure out what the rest of our life is going to look like. I know I went to the university at Buffalo, and I was only there for a year, and I didn't make it, you know, because I had other priorities. Other things were of more importance to me at that time. But I also didn't know that there was a lot of mental health and kind of digging deeper that needed to be done in order to address those things. And that's not in a demoralizing type of way whatsoever. It's just kind of getting to know ourselves. And, you know, I think what you're doing right now is powerful. I really do. And I think you are aligned with what you are meant to be doing. It might not be that MD position, or it might not be, you know, six figures. And I can say to you that, but my life is fulfilling, you know, and I think that more than anything, you are driven by a bigger purpose, and that's what you're doing. So, you know, kudos to you.
Caitlin uses the frame, it's not a moral failing. A lot of times we do get in this situation like somehow we failed. You had a situation you got into and you figured it out. Now, one thing you said, you know, I don't go to college to be a camp counselor. You actually just did.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there's no degree to it, but you certainly paid the price to be a completely authentic story. And I appreciate your heart. You've been consistent about that too. I know you're not just doing this for a show. I know this has been a nagging thing for you. And I'd like to see where things go for you in the next few years, because it is your heart and it is authentic.
I appreciate that, because, you know, it takes a lot to well, not from me, but it takes a lot to quit, right? And the biggest thing that I've seen with people is they'll come up to me after I do a speech. You know, they're the same age as me. They're saying, "Oh, I want to do this. I want to quit." And they're like, "How did you do it?" You know, they're amazed. And the biggest advice that I have for those people is just, you have to want to. That's the biggest thing. And I think that you taught me that. You know, you said, you're not going to do something you don't want to do. And that, I just want to say, that really resonated with me when I was in the hospital, because you kind of said, make up your mind. You kind of were forcing me into that position of, oh, you know, you're in control of your life. Mm-hmm. Control it. Like, why are you just, you know, being a marionette right now? And I really think that resonated with me hard when you kind of like came in and slapped me around and said, "Get it together, man. What are you doing?"
Well, I kind of had to.
I hope you didn't slap him around.
No, the door was shut. No,
boy.
No, but it was serious though, because the reason for that was some of your anxieties were based on you trying to do the right thing to make up for something that you had done, quote unquote, wrong. So you had all these people telling you what you should do, and you're sitting in the middle of here going, "I don't know what I want to do," but you had so many possibilities because you're a brilliant kid. You got so much. I don't mean to be derogatory about kid, but you're a lot younger than me. You have so much available to you, so many options. And when we're in chaos and we have so many options, it's so hard to choose.
Right.
So we had to get to a place where everybody got blocked out of the room and had to leave you alone, and you make your choice, because you got a bigger fight to fight than just what you're doing for a job. Mm-hmm. If you believe this is a calling, you are going to be attacked. And the lessons you learned on those days are going to make you stronger for the days when you're down the road and you're doing the right thing and doing what you're supposed to be doing too.
Right. And, you know, it's just, it doesn't feel like it was only like 4 months ago that all this happened. You know what I mean? It's just such a crazy experience. It has been a crazy experience. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you've done, because
it's kind of you, but
man,
it was you.
I mean, it took someone to, you know, kind of spell it out for me, but I don't know if that's my fault or if that's just how life is, that you know, I don't know. I think that it was a great thing that you did.
Here's why it is not me. And I can tell you this with 100% assurance. And this is regardless of the show. That situation happened because of where I gave my life. I was being used for a purpose because I gave my life over to that purpose. And it was driven by my God. So, I mean, that's what I believe to be true. And the reason I was there in that place was because I have a purpose that's beyond me. Because I can tell you that in and of me, I couldn't be there for you. I couldn't help you. I'd have been a defender for you. If somebody was in the room messing with you and clouding your decisions and checking your bags, I would always stand up for you, you know, but I couldn't help you that way. The sustainability of it was because we all surrender to this thing at some point beyond us. At some point, it's not a tactic. You have to address something beyond you. And for me, I have, and it gave me the opportunity to meet somebody that I think as wonderful as you, with a future that you have that really, I can't wait to see where it heads. The things that you're dealing with, and you haven't, this has not been an easy 4 months. So let's not dismiss that. It's only been 4 months because, you know, talk about some of the things you've had, some relationship issues.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, as in terms of relationship, it's very difficult to kind of say to one of your friends, don't do that. Right. That's kind of the hardest thing to do, I think, is when you have friends and you kind of have to tell them no, because you want to say yes. You want to be the good guy. You want to be nice because they're your friends. Right. Mm-hmm. But there were instances where I had to tell my friends, you know, if you smoke, don't do it around me. Don't let me see it. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want that in my life anymore. as I said, I was moving in with two of my friends. One of them smoked. And I said, I'm not moving in with you if you smoke. And he quit.
That's awesome.
To move in.
That's
and
respect.
And he was really like, I helped him through it and stuff, but his will, man, I could really powerful will, that kid. But
can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
You just described what it's like to not be a rude friend. Could you tell that guy Brian?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Brian's response, right, Caitlin, is I hate you. So it sounds like your friends got on board, though.
Yeah. Well, some of them are having more of a challenge in quitting and stuff. Mm-hmm. I've heard them express, like, oh, I want to, but, they end up not doing it. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that, it's your decision. You can do what you want with your life. It's not my place to say, do this. But I had this experience. This experience is real. This is what happened. These are the facts. This is what I had to deal with.
Hey, Gio, let me just jump in real quick here because I want to highlight, this is exactly what we've been talking about. So the two things that I hear going on are willingness and trustworthiness.
Right.
And Caitlin shared a little bit last time, it was she had trust in a close friend and she became willing to trust them and enter into sobriety. What I just heard you say is what has been my goal for this show and so many others is this idea of swimming upstream. You had what we refer to as a ground zero incident. You coded 3 times in the hospital. And for others, ground zero can look like different things. But what you just did was prevent a ground zero moment for your friend. Right. And the reason that was there was because he trusts you and you were willing to set it out there. We're not going to do this if you're going to smoke. And because of the strength of the relationship, you guys are buddies, probably go way back. You had the courage to draw that line in the sand. I think for so many other people, it's, well, I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to put my views on somebody else. Why not? Are you going to wait until their life is in a pile of rubble before you're willing to say something? No, you stepped up in a difficult time in your life, and you basically swam upstream to save your friend from having the same type of moment. So that's the kind of thing that, don't lose sight of that. You're already changing lives because you are a changed life. And I think if people can start to see that, it is that trust. Again, I'm not going to use my example of the diet, but when we have goals, we are only going to set goals if we think we can make them based on trust, whether it's we trust the process or we trust the coach or the person that's setting us out on those. And your roommate trusted you and stopped. So, please, everybody take a second to see that Gio has a changed life and he's changing other lives because of it. And it's all of those things coming together for that perfect storm. He was willing to do it. His friend was willing to listen. His friend trusted him. He stood for what he knew was part of his own sobriety, and it would also help prevent someone else from having that catastrophic moment. And that's what we want to do. And it's not just in the addicted community. It's not just in the using community or in the violating community. It can be for saving marriages, saving physical health from bad diets or whatever. The willingness and trustworthiness have to be there.
Brian, one of the things I love about what you just said is really, you did bring it back full circle. I mean, even with some of the things Caitlin was sharing and what Gio's been sharing here too, is it really comes down to that one. Our changed lives, as you referred to, really comes down to that one right in front of us and our ability to, our willingness, first of all, to actually have the conversation. Some of it just starts with our own willingness and boldness to say, look, I'm even willing to have the conversation. And in some cases, humble ourselves to a point where we expose some things that are not real comfortable to at least relate.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's underscoring this. Well, I don't want to push my views on someone else. So understand the trade-off that you're making. I don't want to offend this person, so I'm going to be willing to watch them collapse. That doesn't make sense. We don't think that's the trade-off we're making. And I think that's the thing that Gio talked about too a little bit was, having to make these decisions moving forward. And now you're looking at it with a wider lens. You're understanding, okay, if I use one time, it's not just a one-time use. I'm having to hit the reset button on everything I've rebuilt for the last 4 months. It's so many of those little trade-offs that we make in those daily decisions. You have to be aware of those trade-offs, and you have to be intentional about them. So, good on you. And I hope you continue to do that, because you obviously, you've come a long way in a short time. You are super capable. And if you continue to just have that grit of, I'm going to put it out there and, share my story, but do it in a compelling way and in a challenging way. I mean, you talked about how, Chris came in and slapped you around. Essentially, you did the same thing with your buddy, right? You probably just weren't as goofy looking or as much of a jerk as Chris was about it.
There we go. Whatever.
But seriously, you said it yourself. It was hard to tell this to my friend, but you know what? You did it. And that's that step of self-discipline that people need to be willing to take for people they care about.
Right. And I really think that, I've had people talk to me about it, and I give them that same advice of, you have to surround yourself. You have to put yourself in an environment that's going to be healthier for you. Right. And the kind of argument that, I always get against that is that people don't want to inconvenience their friends. Mm-hmm. And they don't want their friends to be mad at them. And in response, I always say, well, if they're your real friends and they really care about you, they're going to help you through this. They'll put aside something as small as vaping, even if they don't quit themselves. Maybe they'll, leave the room, or they won't do it around you, or they won't surround you with that environment. And that's all you're asking them to do.
Yeah. The other thing is when you actually have somebody that's willing to make a change, I mean, there is a certain level of investment you do to kind of show them the way. And right. You don't have to hang on to them forever, and it's not healthy either, but right. You do kind of got to show them the way. So that part of that boldness is a little bit of an investment as well. So,
but I think there's strength in stepping up and standing and saying something. We have a good friend of our family, a woman that one day decided she was going to go on a diet and lose some weight. She came back like 3 months later. She brought me a picture of when she was at her biggest. And she looked at me and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And that was powerful, because we had the relationship where she had the trust to bring it and throw it back in my face. Right. And I didn't have the willingness to trust in the relationship to say, hey, look, you're getting to an unhealthy place. And I think that falls into all these different areas of our life where we have weaknesses. We know other people have weaknesses, and we need to be willing to say something. And it doesn't have to be in a conflict way, but at the end of the day, understand the trade-off. I'm going to say this for your benefit. And if it somehow ruins our relationship, at the end of the day, I know I can go to sleep saying, well, I said something. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say, well, I didn't say anything because it would be uncomfortable. And like Gio's saying, it's difficult and it can be awkward, but I also don't want to stand next to their bed like your best friend crying because they think they might lose you and they didn't say anything. Right. So I think there's something powerful in that, in the relationships that we have. And as we try to lean out into the community, like Caitlin's doing so much, and Chris, as you get out there to have those difficult conversations, because people see it in your eyes. They know it's authentic. They know it comes from a good place. And you're that kind of beacon of strength and hope that they need to hear it from.
Yeah, Gio, I do appreciate you coming on the show. It's been great. I mean, you've been doing a lot of speaking engagements. I know you were on one of the news channels a while back, and you had an outstanding interview on that. I just want to give you a huge compliment for that. I thought you handled yourself well, and you were fresh out of the gate on that, and you did it really well.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, what else you got coming up? Anything?
Yeah. So, I don't want to, count my eggs before they hatch.
Yeah.
Chickens before they hatch.
Don't stop. You want to count your chickens before they eat something.
But, I have been contacted by Thompson Hospital.
Nice.
And Syracuse Krause Hospital to do some speaking engagements. U of R, I might be speaking at U of R in tandem with my pulmonologist.
Okay.
So that might be coming in. And Blue Cross, Blue Shield as well.
Nice.
They have reached out to me as well. So, and also schools, high schools and stuff. I'm, I just last week or 2 weeks ago, I went out to Marcellus and did a talk. So I've been, I kind of took a little hiatus over the break, the winter break, but now I'm getting back into the swing of things and starting that stuff up again. So
stay focused on your own recovery at the same time. The field is fertile. Get out there and find. There's so much opportunity for you. You're a great spokesperson for these great organizations, and I'm glad to see that you're out there doing that. We do appreciate you being on the show, Brian. I don't know if you want to make any closing comments.
No, I mean, thanks, Gio. It's a pleasure to connect with you, and I think as I end with the learning to appreciate people mantra all the time, it goes two ways. And so it's, I have value, everybody does. And sometimes it takes the, that second step of, recognizing. You have to choose sometimes to recognize your own value and take care of yourself. And then other times it's that discipline of, choosing to recognize the values in other people and reaching out to them. And I think you're doing a great job of that. So thanks for coming on.
Caitlin,
thank you.
Do you have anything?
Just also a pleasure to connect with you. And I look forward to all of your future speaking engagements. And I also want to piggyback on what Brian said, that you are completely capable. I certainly believe in you, and I just met you. So I think you're very well spoken, and you have a message that certainly needs to be shared. So, yeah, I'm thinking this is great.
Well, we do appreciate you being on the show, and thanks for everybody tuning in. I just want to say thank you to this team. And, when we first started the idea of 100 Proof Living, if an 80 proof bottle took my life, it's going to take nothing short of 100 Proof Living to get it back. I genuinely believe that, Brian and Caitlin, you two are representative of that 100 Proof Living for me. I have a connectivity in this community that matters so much to me in my recovery, and I'm so thankful for both of you and what we're doing here. And Gio, what I've learned from you through this path has been great too. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in to 100 Proof Living, where we believe that changed lives change lives.